Hello there, and welcome to this chess video where we look at another game featuring the Delayed Evans Gambit. The opening played sensationally by Daniil Dubov at the Russian Super Final. If you haven't seen that game, I strongly encourage you to have a look at that one first. I will leave a link in the card above. So that game, by many considered one of the best games of 2020. Where Daniil Dubov unleashed a very unusual move in the opening. And that game kind of left at least one question unanswered. But it seems that we found Dubov's disciple, Maxime Lagarde. Will there be more disciples? Only time will tell. But this could be a very interesting line for you to try out in your games, especially if you're a e4 player, and if you already play the Italian with bishop c4, as we saw in this game, bishop c5. Of course, knight f6 is the other move you would have to cover to more or less have a repertoire against e4, e5. c3, knight f6, and just like in the Dubov game, we see d4 instead of the quiet Giacomo pianissimo where people go d3, which we'll see in the top tournaments these days, but d4 takes. And now this rare move, a pawn to b4. Bishop b6 was played by Batsiashvili. Lagarde's opponent in this game is Nino Batsiashvili from Georgia. He's rated 2466, a very strong player, obviously. But Lagarde is the rating favorite. He was France's board number 1 at the last European Championship, so a very strong player, as the rating does suggest. Now, just like Dubov, he plays e5, and if you remember the Karakin game, he went knight e4, we saw bishop d5, take on c3, bishop d5, very big initiative for white, and Dubov won the game in very nice style. But what about d5? And that's exactly what Nino Batsiashvili played. She played pawn to d5. So now hopefully we get some answers. Lagarde took the knight, he takes f6, pawn takes e4, and now he played the move b5. We mentioned in the Dubov video that, well, this pawn will generally be back here and this bishop here in chess theory in this line. So without b4 and bishop b6. So here we see the difference. White can play b5, and this is what Lagarde does. And, well, was this the idea of Dubov? We don't know, most likely. Now, the knight doesn't have a lot of squares, and Batsiashvili put it on a5. Queen e2 check by Lagarde. And if you want to play this line, we do need full disclosure, and the full disclosure is that the computer thinks black should castle here. But black is very, very unlikely to play this unless he has studied this line with a computer. The computer wants to sacrifice the piece. You take, we play rook e8 check. Now the king has to give up the castling rights, play king f1 and d3, and these pawns are very, very strong indeed. Clamping down white's position so much that we can afford to be a piece down here. The rook comes into e2, pressure on f2, white has to defend it. And now a move like queen e8, intending to take on c6 and develop the queen there. The queen is active here. We have some ideas with the bishop, some tactics, and the rook is coming over here. All the black pieces are very active. So this will be very difficult for white in practice. He is up a piece, but the compensation just looks overwhelming. So I'd be curious to know what Dubov would have done in this line, but again, black would have to sacrifice the piece without having prepared with a computer. So you can play this line, I guess, until people figure out that they can do this. But until then, you can have a lot of fun, as Lagarde did in this game after knight a5. He played queen e2 check, bishop e6, the standard move to play here, blocking the check. Now f takes g7. Of course, no time to play play a move like this, we will take the rook with check, so rook g8 has to be played, and now we can take on d4. And here, already, black plays a very bad move and ends up in a lost position. We can, well, quickly disregard a move like this, even though it wins a pawn. The bishop is now very strong on the post, protecting the pawn, safely castle, and this is out of the game. This is not something that black wants to see. Probably the best move is something like queen d7, and we'll have an interesting game. d5 could be a very interesting pawn sacrifice here for white, trying to open up the position, but knight c3 is also very solid, and yeah, the game goes on. But in the game, Batsiashvili played c5, which turns out not to be a very good idea. Bishop d5 was played by Lagarde, queen d7, and now knight c3. White can simply disregard this threat of taking on d4, and he gets very active pieces. Takes, and now the knights become super active. Knight e5, queen d6, knight e4. We're threatening a knight jump into f6 here. Black has to give a check to avoid that. King f1, and now rook takes g7. Knight jumps into f6. And the king has only one square. If we go to any of these, it's going to be a check and picking up the queen. So king f8 is forced. And here rook e1. Now this is completely winning for white. He should have played bishop h6. Mind you, this is a little bit scary. I'm not going to say like completely winning, but the computer thinks it's just completely game over. But human still needs to find some moves. But it seems like we are going to win this rook here on g7, and that's going to be too much. A few more moves. We could actually take this pawn first, come back, and then we just win this rook. And it looks like we're going to stop the pawns fairly easily, so this should be a winning position for white. So instead he played rook e1 here, and now black gets a little bit more. At least he can take the bishop for the rook, but still white should be winning here. d3. Black is trying to get some counterplay. The only counterplay, of course, is to count on these far advanced passed pawns. d2. But now white moves in. Knight g6. White wants to get at the black king, and does so with rook takes e6. A nice sacrifice, removing the defender, and the queen gets in. So now we have some checks. Queen takes e6, queen f7, and then king e2, simply activating the rook and stopping black from promoting. So after all of this, white is up 2 pawns. Very active knights, a nice queen, and black still has some problems with development and bad pieces. So all in all, this should be winning still for white. Knight to e4, threatening to take the pawn on d2. Now some further checks, lining up the queen here, and then bringing in these lovely knights, threatening a knight check on d5. But queen c4 check, king f3. Black could have simplified, queen takes b5, but then we swap the queens, and I'm guessing we're very happy to just eventually take this pawn. We have 3 connected passers, which should be enough for the win. So queen c4 was the try here by Batsiashvili, but now king f3. How often do you see this? Both kings hiding on the 3rd rank. I think the white king is a bit better, so we'll make that green. This one looks a little bit more dodgy. c2 now, trying to make the pawns work, but then you have to give up the d2 pawn, which Lagarde takes. Queen takes at b5. And here, white probably should have just gone the easy way, knight d5 check, followed by queen e4, attacking the pawn. And if you try to defend it, I play knight b4 check and pick up the pawn. And again, the 3 connected passers should be enough to see white through here. Although it's by no means easy. It's a very open position, so things get very complicated in such an open position when you have to calculate stuff. So there's always some danger. And here, white goes for the pawn. But very clever here by black, finally solving the matter of the king. And now, after having moved the king, the knight is unpinned. So, huge threat here on d4 all of a sudden. What to do about it? Lagarde's rook decides to take on c6. Give up the exchange. We have a forced trade here. And very interesting ending. 2 knights and 4 pawns against the rook, bishop, and 2 pawns. White should be up on material, but all of a sudden, black has a rook, and the rook becomes active. So we can safely say that Lagarde has missed a great opportunity to win a very nice game, and now he has to struggle in the endgame. He plays h5, he loses the a-pawn now. The knights have a very hard time protecting, pawns on the flank. We do have this pawn, but the bishop is coming. Bishop f6, stopping the queening square. Knight e5. We don't have time to take this because it takes a long time for the rook to get around to the pawn. He's not going to be able to do that, so a4. White gets the pawn here, and knight b4. And here we have a repetition, very unusual. Knight d3. Lagarde went back, and they agreed to a draw because of a threefold repetition. But it seems to me that black could have at least tried. Played a move like rook b6, simply intending to target this pawn. This pawn is threatening to run. You don't want to allow it to run much faster because, okay, we have this covered. Move like this. We can already target the pawn and just take it. And surely black can at least make white suffer a little bit. I don't think black has, many chances to lose this game. So, but who knows? Probably the time situation was pretty bad for Batsiashvili, and she decided to, bail out to the draw, having been under pressure for most of the game. So, perhaps an understandable decision. But this was another outing with this very exciting delayed Evans Gambit, and another super exciting game, and hopefully you can now use this line in your games, check it out, and see how you do with it. I will see you later in another video. See you then. Bye-bye.